Hi, this is Mr. Ali. We're here today to talk about independent and dependent variables. We've come across this in a couple of worksheets lately and quizzes, so we're going to try to understand this topic better. In order to understand this, we need to understand a specific situation that's being given to us in a word problem. For example, the amount of electricity used for air conditioning in the home increases as the temperature increases. What is this actually saying? They're saying, like, if you go to school on a hot day and you leave the air conditioning off and you come home and the house is 85 degrees, well, you're probably going to want to turn on the air conditioning when you get home. As soon as you do that, and the air conditioning might be set for 74 degrees. So you're wanting the house to cool down from 85 degrees to 74 degrees. That's going to use a certain amount of electricity, which is going to run the air conditioning continuously until the temperature comes down. But what if you just it wasn't a hot day, it was a pretty normal day, and you come home and it's only 75 degrees, and you still turn on the air conditioning, but it's still set for 74, so you're not going to use a lot of electricity between when you get home and when the house gets to 74. So the amount of electricity used is going to depend on, or be based on, how the temperature increases. So we're going to look at that phrase, depends on, and then we're going to try to understand what that means in terms of independent and dependent variable. So what are the variables? Well, there's two of them. And we're talking about, right now in this class, two variable situations. So in this case, the two variables are the amount of electricity used for air conditioning and the temperature. So what depends on what? Make a sentence out of the two variables using the words depends on. One of them might be, the amount of electricity used for air conditioning depends on the temperature. Now write it the other way around. The temperature depends on the amount of electricity used for air conditioning. Guess what? These are different statements, but they both kind of make sense. So we have to understand which sentence sounds like it matches what the situation is describing. Let's go back to the original situation. I've copied it here, except that I highlighted, or I bolded the part which says increases as the. So the amount of electricity used for air conditioning in homes increases as the temperature increases. It sounds like the actual amount of electricity used is going to be based on what the temperature is. Does that make sense based on the story that I told at the beginning about coming home to a hot house or a not so hot house? The amount of electricity you're going to need is going to be based on what the temperature is. In this case, this phrase, the amount of electricity used for air conditioning depends on the temperature, sounds like it matches the situation better. But wait, that doesn't tell us which the independent and dependent variables are, does it? Well, here's what you do. Once you identify which depends on statement makes more sense, you underline what comes before the depends on in the statement. In this case, the amount of electricity used for air conditioning comes before depends on. That phrase that comes before depends on is the dependent variable. It depends on something, so it's dependent on something. So in this case, a dependent variable is the amount of electricity used for air conditioning, which means that the independent variable is the temperature. So right now, we've taken a situation about the amount of electricity and the temperature and figured out what the dependent and independent variables are. A couple of things I want you to keep in mind are that we had a chart in some notes we took earlier a couple of weeks ago that showed us the relationships between the terms independent variable and dependent variable and other terms that we've been studying. So keep these in mind, or keep the table handy, so that if you have a problem that asks you to do something once you know the independent dependent variable, like graph x and y, or write a domain and range, then you can know that the independent variable values are the x's, or the domains, and the dependent variables are the y variables, or the f of x value, or the range values. Hopefully you understand independent and dependent variables better now. To improve your understanding about this topic, whenever you hear yourself or someone else using the phrase depends on, See if you can identify what variables they're talking about and which is the dependent and independent variable. Have fun!